of us. Takes us a second to speed up on everything. I am red on my camera. Got producer Devin behind us, looking at 4 computer screens. Let's see where we're at. Hopefully everybody's been out scouting, had a successful week, has some questions, comments for us, some stories.
All right, Nathan, I think we are good on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, guys, welcome. Again, thank you so much for tuning in this week's show. Again, I am Nathan Zielinski, ambassador for Bowtech. Added a couple new channels. So again, we are going live, and thank you for watching, whether you're on the Bowtech Facebook page, the Diamond Archery Facebook page, the Bowtech website, Bass Pro Shops of Denver, Tightline Outdoors, or Nate Zielinski. I think we also have a couple other pages joining us too. So again, a huge thanks for joining us live. Our goal here is to make this all about you guys, all the viewers, the listeners. Our goal is to make you guys more successful hunters. I spent a lot of time in the field myself. I guided big game hunts for 10 years, hunt avidly. I spent as much time in the field as absolutely possible. I have experience with archery, muzzleloader, and rifle, most big game species. So again, the idea here is just to talk about something that I do personally, something that I know, something that's near and dear to my heart. Hopefully you guys gain some knowledge from it and you're more successful. We'd also love to answer your questions and kind of participate with you guys. So everybody out there, if you have questions, your concern, goals, things like that, comment below. Send us your questions. We'll answer them live. Generally speaking, we have the topic that we're going to talk about here in the first portion, and then after that, we'll take those live questions. So make sure you send those questions in. Again, the moral and the kind of concept of this is scouting. We always preach spend 60% of your available time to hunt scouting and 40% actually participating in the hunt itself. With that said, right now, as our big game season starts to unfold here in the next couple weeks, I hope everybody's been out there doing their scouting. Again, we always talk about learning the land, the terrain, the resource first, then learning the animals, and then putting it all together. Basically, we're now learning the animals as we start to approach August, coming up here in another week or so. That's when we kind of start morphing it all together. So right now we're still very focused on the animals. We already know the terrain, hopefully. We know the water holes. We know all the bedding grounds, know all the water, the food, everything like that. And hopefully now we're learning the animals themselves, watching the mature animals, the less mature animals, all the females. And then we're going to put it all together here in the next couple weeks or so and tie it all together and hopefully be successful on the hunt. As a lot of you have been following, I have a lot of tags here. I'm participating just as a viewer, as a help, as a host per se, of a couple of sheep hunts in Colorado. I got some pronghorn tags myself. I got a bear tag, got a deer tag, got an elk tag. So I spend a lot of time with that. And then I'll be joining a lot of fellow, friends and other hunters in the woods this fall and just bringing their stories to life. So you'll be able to follow us on a lot of live footage, a lot of live hunts and things like that. So again, got a lot of tags. Hopefully you can learn from our success or learn from our failure. And again, just take that for some knowledge for you, and hopefully you're successful. Start off, we're going to talk about where I've been with my scouting this week. The 2 big things that we've seen so far this week is, number 1, found a couple of good elk. I've been scouting a lot for those animals, and every year I try to find a couple animals that just wow me, a couple big bulls, like we talked about last week. I don't really want to call myself a trophy hunter. I hate that concept, but I love finding big mature animals, one of a kind, whether that's the biggest animal or the weirdest, craziest antlers or whatever it is. I love the fact that I love to pick an animal, learn that animal, and have the challenge of hunting one animal. Hopefully I can maybe find 2 of those so I have a backup plan. But regardless, I love chasing these big bulls. They're smart. They got big for a reason. I love that challenge of chasing after it. And I love the concept that right now my life's a wreck because I'm so caught up in these animals. And even though I hate it, I absolutely live for it. I love the fact that right now I know there's a couple of giant animals, and you're just wondering who else knows about them, who's going to hunt them, what's my best available time. I'm learning the patterns, learning the animals, and trying to hold true to that. So talk about the elk first. Now, guys, we were pulling this up on this TV right here, but it's a little blurry. This is taken from a spotting scope. I got within 100 yards of this animal a couple times over the last 3 weeks. Really checked him out. I've watched him from abroad, from afar, for countless days now. But I'm going to pull it up here. Hopefully you can see it on the phone. I'll hold it very still. I'm going to start off with Facebook, and then we'll roll over to Instagram. But the bull standing next to this animal is a very traditional, 2.5, 3.5-year-old 4x4 bull. He's actually a 4x5, but regardless, it's a young bull in this picture, and then this large 6x7 that I've actually been watching and chasing there. So, Devin, tell me when I'm clear.
Back up a little bit.
Back up.
Still bright. Can we dim it down?
1 second, folks. Sorry about that. We're very, very high tech here. Holding up a phone. How about that?
Much better.
All the viewers see that? So again, the bull, the smaller bull, is a 4x5. I'd say a very typical, 2.5 to 3.5 year bull, wherever you're hunting. And then next to it is a bull I think I'm going to name Ricky Bobby. This bull tends to be first everywhere he goes, everywhere he's walking. He is always the lead bull, and then if he falls behind because he's feeding, he trots quickly to catch up. Now we go over to Instagram there. Sorry guys, again, you're looking at my arm. Hopefully everybody can see that bull right there. So again, we're naming that bull right there Ricky Bobby.
A little bit. Good.
There we go. You can check him out again. Sorry for the sophistication of the cameras here, but guys, this is a giant bull. This bull right now is in mid 390s. They still got, we always say that they're going to grow somewhere to August 5th, August 10th, hopefully, here in the Rocky Mountain region. So that bull might be pushing that 400-inch mark. So we'll see if we get him. Hunting a new area, not an area that I typically hunt that much. So kind of some new stuff, hunting some new units. But regardless, it's a big giant bull. We've got a very good pattern on him right now, but we are a long ways from season. So we'll see what happens with that big bull there. But I know it's exciting. I found that animal. Actually found another bull that I have not been able to get close to. I've had this other bull, very similar to that bull, in a spotting scope at 5 miles many times now, and I cannot seem to break the distance. I hike in the extra distance. I went 13 miles one day, and he's still across the canyon. This bull's moving a lot, this other big bull, and I just can't seem to get close to him. I know he's an absolute giant, but I haven't been able to get really close to get the fine details. But I got 2 big bulls I'm watching. Again, they're just wrecking my life, just all over my mind, and I love it. So other things we're talking about, guys, I have a pronghorn tag. I'm going to show you one picture of that. This right here is my favorite pronghorn right now. Nothing super special, just a really nice. Today, while doing some scouting for pronghorn, I had the opportunity. I ended up seeing right around 160 animals. I think I saw a total of 50 bucks. So a tremendous day of scouting pronghorn. Of that, I saw maybe 7 to 8 really good bucks, mature, just really good animals. Of that, I've been scouting a lot of them. I chose that animal as my favorite. He is not the biggest, but so far on about any given day that I've been scouting, I've been able to get within shooting range of that animal, whether using a cutout decoy, an actual target decoy, using livestock as cover, trains cover, or sitting on water. I've been on a lot of these animals. A lot of these animals are starting to get just somewhat sketchy. Really, unless the last week, it seems like they're getting just a little edgy. I don't know if there's a lot of guys scouting and they're knowing the hunting season's coming up or what, but some of these animals are getting a little sketchy. That buck there, I've been able to sneak up within range multiple times. So right now, that's one of the top of the list coming up August 15th for that opener of pronghorn here in Colorado. So watching those bucks and doing that scouting, but really I've been putting a lot of emphasis on that pronghorn and that elk. This coming, we're going to put a lot of emphasis on mule deer and bear. Then we're going to put a lot more emphasis on sheep as it's approaching very quickly too. So that's where I personally have been. Those are the type of things I want to hear from you. Comment below. Let us know how your scouting is going. I know we have one follower named Cody down there. He was struggling to find some animals. We really encouraged him to get a spotting scope, scoop back. He was really fine-tuned scouting. He was in the field, in the drainages, and he was having a hard time finding these animals. He grabbed a spotting scope this week. He sat on top of some peaks, covered, mini drainages, looking at 15 drainages from afar, from miles away. Started finding groups of animals, and once he found groups of animals, he snuck in to get closer looks, and it really helped him out and encouraged the scouting. So, it really, brought scouting to that full effect. That's the type of stuff we want to hear about. We want to hear from you. If you're having struggles, if you're not finding animals, right now is a time where you should be on animals and you should be building patterns. It's not going to change that much until those September seasons start rolling around if you have that early tag. So if you're on animals, great. Learn the patterns, study them. Learn everything you can about these animals, where they're bedding, where they're drinking, the times at which they're moving around. Study everything. Study the wind thermals. Everything's going to make a difference in that hunting season. The more knowledge you have, the more successful you will be. So you should be on that. Again, we keep preaching, if you are not in animals, A month ago, I wasn't concerned about the animal; it was about the land. Now I'm concerned about the animal. So if you are not on animals, I don't want to say you're running out of time, but it's definitely time to really get out there and put in the extra effort and find those animals. If you have struggles with that, comment below. We'll take some questions here, guys, and we'll make sure we get those questions answered and hopefully dial you into where you are starting to become more successful. So keep that in mind. All right, guys, we're going to talk about a couple things here. First topic of the night, we're going to talk about animal breakdown. Second, we're going to start talking about calling. Now, this is going to be just a small phase of the calling, and then in about 2 weeks, we're going to really full-blown cover the calling concept, especially for elk, and then we'll talk about calling about everything else that you can call to. But elk will be the main focus of that coming up here later. But number one, we're going to talk about animal breakdown right now. So, in the situation of a lot of the different animals that we're hunting, mainly focus is pronghorn, mule deer, and elk. Those are things that we're seeing right now. Whitetails are going to fall kind of right in there with the mule deer pattern. But on a lot of these animals, we're seeing a lot of bachelor groups. So in all species, a lot of the pronghorn are grouped up in groups of males. A lot of the mule deer especially are grouped up in big groups of males. And these elk are in those groups of those more dominant males within a herd per se. So that's really what we start looking for as we unfold into the rut. So as the pronghorn, as the deer, as the elk, everything starts going into rut, starts losing velvet, starts building testosterone. Basically, as we fold into the fall, whether it's associated with a rut or just associated with that fall patterns going into basically a winter season, what are these animals going to do? And so many of us a lot of times get caught up on the bachelor groups and these herds, and then all of a sudden come hunting season, they start to break apart, and it can really throw us for a loop. So what we always ask ourselves is, what are the animals going to do? What's going to change? Now, the animals that rut the soonest or the earliest are really going to have the biggest effect in that change. So to talk about that first. So the elk is probably the biggest thing that I see. Right now we're finding, especially if you hunt in higher elevations, more than likely you're finding large groups of females and young animals. So, you can find herds of 100 cows, 150 cows, a lot of calves, and a lot of young bulls, maybe 3.5, 4.5 year bulls and less in these large groups. And it's very common. Then you might find independent big bulls, more mature bulls, or you might find bachelor groups of these big bulls. I think the biggest group of bulls I saw this week was 13 animals. Saw a lot of groups of that, like 3 to 6. So again, 3 to 6 bulls in a group. A lot of that animal that you saw earlier, that big giant bull that I've been chasing or been following, he's in a group of 5 right now. So he's the dominant bull of 5. He's leading them all around. He's always the first one to bed. He's the first one walking. He's leading the crew everywhere he's going for the most part. He'll lag behind a little bit, but he definitely speeds up to catch up. But we're watching that because obviously as it gets close to September, these animals are going to break apart. Generally speaking, you're not going to have herds of 100 cows, 150 cows. It's going to break up smaller groups, and we have to ask ourselves how that's going to unfold. I know we talked about this last week, but it's really important to understand that in the fact that I'm looking at the terrain, I'm looking at the animals, and you're really focused on asking yourself, how is it going to unfold? Is these 150 cows going to break up into 3 groups of 50? Are they going to break up in groups of 4, 8s, 10s, 12s, 20s, whatever it may be? So generally speaking, I look at how many cows I have in an area in an elk situation. Then I look at how many bulls I have in an area. When I'm looking at the bulls, I ask myself what's a dominant bull and what's a lesser bull, basically a satellite bull. And I want to ask myself which one of these animals is going to hold a harem. If you have a lot of elk that are very similar in size, let's say antler growth, if you have 15 bulls and they're all 5x5s, fairly similar, they probably are all going to break up into a very similar harem. They're all going to break apart, and that harem is going to divide up, and they'll all have about equal amount of cows. Obviously, you're going to have some more aggressive bulls, but it's really going to break down somewhat evenly. In the more real world, you're going to have a handful of big dominant bulls, some medium bulls, and then a lot of those younger bulls. So I look at how many dominant bulls I have, and that's how I break my count down. So I'm going to say, hey, if I have 5 dominant bulls, most of these cows are going to break up into that groups of 5. Obviously, I have some independents running around, but that's basically how it's going to unfold. So I always look for my bulls to lead at how everything's going to kind of break down. I'm assuming that those cows will break up, and those bulls will gather what they can. So generally speaking, that's how I break it apart. So if I have say a 2-mile drainage, and I have again say 15 bulls and this and that, I look at all these drainage and I say, hey, this bull can run this cut right here. So this whole drainage is going to be dominated to this herd. This next drainage is going to be to this herd. And it doesn't always unfold as it does in your head, but again, I'm just trying to somewhat have an idea of how it's going to unfold. I want to know that to where I can start to say, hey, I need to have a plan for this spot, a plan for this spot, because when you're watching 150 cows at once and 15 bulls together, it's easy scouting, and it's easy to say, hey, this is going to be a slam dunk. I know where they're all at. But when they break apart, all of a sudden, everything kind of unfolds very quickly. Usually it's a week or two right before the season, and all of a sudden you go up one day and everything's broken up and there's elk everywhere, and you're like, man, where are they at? If you can just, again, tell yourself, hey, roughly speaking, I'm going to have 20 cows and, one dominant bull and 3 satellites, and, here's a spot for them here. That's usually how it's going to unfold. So you, the hunter, just have that backup plan in your mind of this is how it's going to unfold, so this is what I can anticipate, and this is how I'm going to hunt these animals in this terrain. So again, look for your dominant animals to break that down. Same type thing with the deer. Now, while we obviously don't see our mule deer rut until basically that Thanksgiving time period, especially on a mountain mule deer. So it's basically that, that Thanksgiving, you can see an Eastern Plains animal start on, basically Halloween, but it's basically going to be that month of November where you see that rut take place, and that's when these bucks are really going to start, being dominant and kind of putting everything together. Right now, a lot of times these mule deer and these whitetails are in velvet. They're in bachelor groups. The second they start going hardhorn is when you start to see the groups break up a little bit. Not necessarily break up completely, but generally speaking, the second they go to hardhorn, I see the big giant, the super mature bucks go independent, and then those slightly less mature bucks are going to still stay up in those groups. But the second they go hardhorn is when those animals tend to break apart. So if you're watching animals right now and they're still all velveted up, they're probably going to stay that way until that first week of September. The second the velvet rubs off, that's usually where you see your monsters kind of go off and kind of do more of an independent relationship, or that independent lifestyle until the rut takes place, and those slightly less immature animals are going to stay in those groups somewhat until it's time to go find does and really start looking at the rut and how that takes place. So that's kind of the relationship values there that you personally are trying to think of. Same type thing for the pronghorn. You're going to be in those big groups right now. The second they start getting love in the air and they start thinking about the rut, that's when all of a sudden they're going to start breaking apart. You're going to have your mature animals and maybe your sub-mature animals in basically a group, and they're all going to break apart. And very similar to like the elk, you're going to have that dominant buck in a group in that herd, and then some lesser mature animals, and then obviously a bunch of females, a bunch of does. So all of these animals are going to break apart in a similar structure. You just have to ask yourself how it's going to break down, just so you have an idea of what you're dealing with, how many groups you're dealing with. And a lot of times I think about that because if you have too many dominant animals for as many females as you have, this is an important thing to think about. So if you have a ton of big bulls, a ton of big bucks, a ton of big buck pronghorn, and very few females, all of a sudden it's fairly common for these animals to have that fight, have that kind of issue, that hostility, and push one animal far away. So you think you have a lot of options in a certain area. Hey, I got 3 big bulls, everything's going to be good. But if you have 3 big bulls and only 20 cows, more than likely, come hunting season, you're probably only going to have 1 big bull in there, and everything else is going to disperse. And when these animals have to go look to find more cows or find love, they might walk quite a distance. They might leave your entire area in which you've scouted. So also keep that in mind. Throughout the scouting, you're again having that rough idea of male to female and making sure that you have enough females to support the males in that particular area. It might be a drainage, it might be a hillside, it might be a 4-mile by 4-mile grid. But regardless, have a rough idea of what's going on with that, just so you better can anticipate what's happening. Guys, we have one more thing we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about calling, but I think we have some questions here real quick, so we're going to answer a couple questions right here in the middle, and then we're going to go back into our calling statement. So, Devin, what do we got for a question?
All right, I hope you guys can hear me. First question, how far off the road are you hiking in? I thought a mile or 2 back was getting in there, but I'm finding I'm just scratching the surface.
It's 100% situational, to be totally honest with you. I have a lot of spots where literally I can step out of my truck and I can glass and I can see animals. And I have a lot of times where I can literally call to an elk from my truck and I can hear the animals and I can go there. Generally speaking, the more mellow the terrain, the more traffic it gets, the deeper you have to go. The rougher the terrain, the less traffic it gets, and therefore the closer that you can hunt. And I'm going to consider that from a vehicle trail, so whether that's a highway, a side road, a dirt road, or a four-wheel drive trail, all the way up to even paths, things where you could ride an ATV on or take a horse on. We're going to all consider that our main, avenues of travel. From those areas, if it's mellow terrain, generally speaking, you're seeing more hiking traffic, more people camping, more hunters, and therefore it tends to push those animals further back, or I anticipate that animal pushback. As opposed to the other side, the rougher the terrain. I always say rough terrain. Everybody asks me what rough terrain is. If I have to put my weapon, my bow, my muzzle, or my rifle in my backpack, and I have to use my hands to help me climb, that's rough terrain. The other way that I always think about it, if a horse can go there, it's somewhat mellow terrain. I'm not talking distance, but if a horse can actively travel there, it's not, hung up by branches or rocks, it's not slipping. If a horse can get there, somewhat mellow. If a horse has a hard time because it's so rocky, a lot of blowdowns, that's rough terrain. So again, the rougher the terrain, the closer I hunt because those animals don't get pushed. The more mellow the terrain, the further off you go. This week, I'd say the furthest I was going in one-way type hike is about 13 miles. Now, I can tell you right now that I am not that fit. I am not that fit to where I'm going straight in 13 and have to come out 13. I was hiking in 13 and off the mountain and hitchhiking and calling for a ride. So I might have to drop 5-6 miles down to get to the nearest road or out place. But I'm hiking in one direction. A lot of times I'm bailing off and trying to get a ride however I can back. But rough idea, again, everything's going to be suitable for you and your situation. But rough terrain closer, easy terrain further back.
We got another question.
All right, one more question? Yep.
All right, for us flatlanders, and I assume he's talking elk, we are coming to hunt public land in Colorado. There's cattle grazing on public lands. How would you change your tactics when you see cattle? Are elk pushed away by them?
So again, the concept is livestock around elk. Generally speaking, sheep are bad, cattle are fine. Now, I can't say that they're like best friends, but I also can't say that I've ever really superly avoided them. Now, I don't think that I've 100% seen them graze in the same meadows in the morning and evening. I've seen them have bedding grounds 200 yards apart, 300 yards apart. I can't say that they're best buddies, and the cattle can definitely push out the elk or push them around. But generally speaking, I can't say that it's an issue. Now, if you have sheep coming through, you have a lot of options. You have sheep, which number one are loud. They tend to mow down the terrain quite a bit. The elk are pretty terrified of the sheep. They don't like the sheep. On top of that, if you have sheep, you're always going to have sheep dogs. You're also going to have a sheep herder. So sheep are bad. So like the whole northwest corner of Colorado, big sheep country, I would definitely avoid that terrain or make sure you're hunting in front of them. You're not going to ever hunt behind the sheep, so stay ahead of them, a mile ahead of them, or keep distance from the sheep. That's a major problem. As far as cattle, I can't say that it's really a major problem. There's a lot of grazing in the national forest. It's not a big deal. Now, if they have 1,000 head of cattle in a very tight area and it's in the same drainage as you, obviously it can become an issue. But a few cows here and there. A lot of times I've hunted on stock tanks. If you have an area that's super dry, your wallows dry up. I've hunted stock tanks before that that these guys sink in the ground. They use occasionally from year to year, and those elk have no problem drinking out of the same tank that cattle are drinking out of. So cattle not a big deal as long as it's not overwhelming, it should be fine.
We've got another question. You want to do it now?
Yep. Another question.
All right. Cody Lawhorn has a question. When packing out a bull, what order do you prefer to carry out the animal? Do you take the head and hide first or last?
Absolutely. Now, this question really can be broken down state to state. There are states that require a certain ordinance. Most places just require a certain percentage or, all edible meat come out. You're going to really have to look. Obviously, we're talking to people all across the board in the Rocky Mountain regions, if not the entire country. So every state is different. Personally, for me and how I break it down, we're actually going to talk meat care in the next show. So make sure you stay tuned to that the following Monday. So next Monday, we're actually going to have a processor in here that's all all about game care as far as taking care of the meat. But in the woods, I do what's called a no-mess field dress. So every animal I take the cape off. So the animal's laying on side, I take off that whole cape for a shoulder mount on the front half, I skin off the back half, I take off my 2 quarters, take off my back strap, I actually reach in without gutting the animal, take out my inside loin, and I take my neck meat as a part of that back strap, so that's all one piece, more just for the availability that I have one piece of meat instead of a bunch of pieces. Then I skin off those ribs, and I basically have all of the portions of the animal on that one side. In the situation, everything I do, number one, is I get it cool as possible. So my personal process, as long as I'm around some sort of pine tree, most places I'm at, I have some sort of pine tree. So I'll cut some pine boughs off of a pine tree. So I actually make a mat of green pine needles or pine boughs, and I lay my meat on top of that, then I put more pine boughs on top of it. The concept of pine boughs is, number one, they're really open, so there's airflow. So I get air underneath my meat. I put pine boughs on top to keep the flies off, and I really let that meat get cool before putting it in a game bag. So that's kind of my process of that. I always make sure my meat is getting as cool as fast as possible, especially in an archery, muzzleloader, or those early rifle seasons. So I get that meat cooled off. Then I'm going to go ahead and once all the meat's off that animal, so again I have just a carcass there, meat's off of both sides, then I usually skin off my face. So I'm going to finish caping my animal, and I usually take that whole hide off my face if I'm going to do a far pack out. If I'm close, I'll take the whole thing out. But if I'm far, I'm going to skin that whole face off. I'm going to cut the antlers off of that skull plate. So at that point in time, I have antlers laying there, just the skull plate. I have my whole hide, and I have my meat. Now, it really depends on the situation in which you're in and the state law at which you're at. But generally speaking, meat will outlast hide as far as a rot value. So in mediocre temperatures, the hair on a cape, if you're going to do a shoulder mount, can slip fairly quickly. That cape also, as long as you skin most of the meat off of it, isn't as heavy as meat. So a lot of times I'm going to take a hind shoulder and maybe some back straps in my pack, and a lot of times I'll just throw the cape over my shoulder, and my first load out is going to be 90% meat, and I'll just take out that skin just so I can get that cooled off, hopefully in a cooler and a cool place before that hair starts slipping. Then I come back, grab the rest of my meat, and then typically take the antlers out last, whatever that last load is. So again, for me personally, it's usually going to be cape and meat on those first loads, and then antlers as I come through at the end. Just looking for those options of what's going to go first. So that's kind of the concept there. Hopefully that answers it. If you have more questions about that, definitely comment. We'll take through. And really, I just encourage everybody to check their state law. Some places require a certain order that they come in. Some places, as long as it all comes out, you're good to go. So.
You want to keep going?
Yeah, we'll take some more questions. Absolutely.
Alrighty. What is the likelihood that areas that I'm finding groups of elk in right now will still be holding elk during first rifle season? My area will have a lot of pressure archery hunting, but I'm not hunting until first rifle.
Absolutely. So, you have a first rifle tag. Depending on where you're at, that's probably going to be an October tag. Obviously, a lot of these animals are going to get pushed around during archery and muzzleloader seasons, especially here in Colorado. Most DNRs, no matter where you're at, especially in Colorado, they're doing a great job for it. They're giving a large break. So no matter what state you're in, generally speaking, they're going to give these animals a large break. So sometimes it's 10 days, some days it's like 3 weeks. But like here in Colorado, they're giving a wide span of a break in these animals between archery and rifle. And really all the patterns that I'm on now tend to repeat themselves 100% for that first rifle. So I have a great friend that we're going to be doing some hunting with on that first rifle tag, and for the last 5-6 years, my wife's had first rifle tags, I've had first rifle tags. These animals repeat themselves. Now, obviously, the animals that get harvested won't be there, but I would say everything that survives those seasons will fall back into a very normal pattern during that break time. We're also starting to see more and more of the rut take place in those breaks. So if you look at stats, everywhere from state to state that give you a break between the pressure that the archery hunters put on and the muzzleloaders, then there's nobody in the woods for, again, this period between the archery and when the rifle season starts. We're starting to see these animals really put a focus on that breeding when there's no pressure in the woods. So in a lot of situations where people are saying there's no rut, if you went back into the woods a week after your archery season, you'd find out that things are going kind of crazy and losing their mind. So either way, that's kind of that process. But absolutely, I would say 100% scout now. Everything that you find and information you build now more than likely will unfold. Now, if you go back to an archery season, it might not seem like it will, but I promise you in that break, things will come back to normal. So, perfect. hopefully that helps you. Now, guys, we're going to hold off on the rest of the questions. I know we got a bunch more. We're going to talk about calling here real quick before we kind of wrap up with our questions. Now, calling. It's been one of those things that everybody keeps talking about. It's probably the hottest question that we get. Everybody wants to talk about calling, especially in elk. I mean, you turn on the TV. If it's an elk hunt, they're calling bulls in. Everybody that dreams about an elk hunt, whether it's me dreaming about my upcoming hunt this fall, or you're from the East Coast and you've never been on an elk hunt before, everybody thinks about this bull breaking through the trees and peeing on himself and drooling and that whole experience. And there's no doubt there's no bigger rush in the world than a big bull breaking through the trees coming into a call. It's just what it is. I mean, everybody gets excited about turkeys. If you've never hunted elk, I mean, an elk is a turkey on the biggest steroids there ever was. I mean, it's that whole new extreme to have a vocal animal, especially the size of a big bull elk. With that said, people tend to get carried away. People call early in the season. We keep talking about that when we talk about the mistakes that hunters make. It's very often that people get so excited about calling elk that they go out in the woods and, opening day, the rut's not even near taking place. The guys are bugling and cow calling and carrying on. And you can definitely, number one, make your animals aware. You can push those animals. But more importantly, the biggest thing that you see is you quiet these animals up. So even when the rut starts, all of a sudden these animals are not talking, at least not talking during daylight hours. And most cases that you're not hearing bulls bugling during daylight, only at night, is from overcalling early in the just get called by. It's just one of those things. It's what it is. So like we always say, number one, you're not talking to the animals unless they're talking to you. Let them make the first call. When they're talking, you can talk. But if they're not talking, you're not talking. And that's a great thing to think about. So if you go out in the woods and everything's silent, you need to be silent. And that's just something you need to follow every single time you're in the woods when you're elk hunting, especially if you're going to use calls. If they're talking, you're talking. If they're not, you're not. Keep that in mind. But the big thing I want to talk about, more so than all the calls, we'll talk about that just a little bit, but I wanted to walk you through the process of success in a calling situation. And this is going to go for everything, for young bulls, for big bulls. I would say, generally speaking, across the board, most of the rut and most of the breeding takes place at night. Generally speaking, everywhere you go, the actual breeding is going to take place at night. Now, a bunch of it does happen during the day, but again, talking averages across the board, most of this breeding activity is going to take place at night. So the second that sun goes down, these bulls are breeding cows. So at night, a big bull elk, he's going to hold his harem together. So he's running around, keeping these animals in a tight group. He's bugling, he's fighting off other bulls, and then he's also breeding all these animals. So it's a very athletic, trait at night. I mean, these bulls are literally running ragged, trying to protect the harem, trying to gather the harem, and then try to breed these cows. So it's an effort. Now, all of a sudden, we come into the woods and this bull bugling, and we get so excited, and every time we hear a bugle, all we ever think about is this bull wants to fight me. When in reality, more than likely, the bugle is just holding those cows together. All he's doing is just saying, hey, I'm here, I'm dominant, keep yourself together. And again, for the fact this animal might have bred for the last 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, more than likely, in every situation you're being in a morning hunt, all those bulls want to do is push their cows into their bedding zone. So all they want to do is gather those cows and push them, uphill, downhill. Generally speaking, it's going to be uphill, but they're going to push them up into that dark timber wherever they feel safe, and they want to bed those animals down. That is their goal in the morning. So all of a sudden, we come along as a hunter. We step out of the truck. We hear a bugle. We're excited. We bugle back, and he responds, and we start chasing him. Now, everybody that's been on an elk hunt in a calling situation is with me on this. You know right where I'm at. So you're chasing these animals, and they're leaving you, right? They're going up the hill. So you go a little faster. You push your buddy that's got a tag up above you. You're staying back. You're bugling to him. You're calling. And at some point, you get close enough to where all of a sudden the bull starts to come. Everybody gets excited. They're like, he's getting closer. And you set up, and you get all ready, and you're calling, and all of a sudden it stops. And we always say it's like 50 yards out. It's really 200 yards out, but they're so loud we think they're 50 yards out. And you're like, he's right behind that tree. And he bugles a couple times, and you're shaking, you're excited, and you swear it's just one more step. And then all of a sudden, the next bugle you hear, he really is 300-400 yards away. And you're like, man, we were so close. What's happening? And, you start putting more pressure, and all of a sudden the bugles disappear, and the animal's gone. And we're always like, what happened? We were so close. This story happens every single day. So this bull is literally pushing the cows, pushing the cows to bed. All of a sudden, you got close enough to where he felt somewhat threatened. Nobody wants to get beat up in front of their girlfriend. Am I right? Every guy out there that's listening. Do you ever want to get beat up in front of your girlfriend? Probably not. So you push the cows up there to where they're safe, and then you draw away from those cows. Once, you don't get beat up in front of them. Second, if you lose, you still have time to hopefully go back there and save something before this dominant bull takes them all. So they usually, a lot of times, will push those cows off. That bull will drop back, and all he's doing is coming down a little closer to investigate. He's just bugling just to make sure everything's safe. The second you stop and quit putting pressure, that bull knows he's safe. So again, the bull drops down 50 yards from his cow back at you. He's looking down the hill at you. He's bugling, and you're set up ready to shoot. You're not putting any more pressure on that animal. So that bull goes, they're not coming, and he leaves and runs back to his cows, and he puts them to bed. The second they're in bed, everything's good. They're in a quiet place. They're in thick terrain. They know they're safe. They know you can't sneak up on them in those bedding grounds. And that bull is safe. And us, the hunter, are like, we were so close, and we walk away. What, ideally, now, in the average hunt, I still pursue these animals in the morning just like we're talking about. The biggest thing that I personally do, I put as much pressure as I possibly can, especially if I'm calling back and forth to these animals. If you look at natural animals in the wild, you look at two bulls in the wild, one bull doesn't start here, one bull starts here, and one comes all the way 100% to fight the other ones. They meet in the middle. It's one of those things that in a fighting ring, you're in a boxing ring, both the fighters come together. It's just what it is. In a dominant situation in the natural world, these animals come together to have that interaction. So you're going to see these animals meet in the middle. So you as a hunter are one of the animals. So when you have a bull off in the distance, if he's going to come at you, you have to meet his pace. If he's going to come 100 yards in 2 minutes, you need to go 100 yards in 2 minutes and meet him in the middle. So in that situation in the morning when this bull's putting pressure on his cows to put them to bed, if you put enough pressure on the tail of that bull, you're putting enough speed to where that bull says, man, I'm going to have to fight this other bull to keep him away from my cows. The second he starts dropping down towards you, if you keep meeting that pace, he thinks it's game on and he's going to want to come fight. So the name of the game is putting that pressure. Be realistic. If you look at natural animals in the wild, it comes fast, it comes heavy, it comes aggressive. Everything happens faster. So you, the hunter, have to put that same emphasis on that speed, on that power, on that aggression. Now, I'm not saying I'm bugling, screaming. I'm not saying I'm the wickedest bull out there. I'm just talking more covering distance. That bull's coming, I'm coming. I might be doing the weeniest soft bugle in the world, but I'm meeting him distance-wise to at least put that pressure, say I'm not backing down. And that's going to cause that interaction. That's where all of a sudden that bull's going to come in and give you that 10-yard shot, that 15-yard shot. So that's the concept there. Now, when you look at big bulls, you look at general hunting in general, so much more success comes in the afternoon. Now, a lot of people are like, I never hunt the afternoons. It's windy, it's stormy. A lot of us hike hard in the morning, we're tired. So many of us don't hunt the afternoon or don't put as much effort into the afternoon, when in reality, the afternoon a lot of times presents a little bit more opportunity and by far more success. The concept here, this animal goes up in beds. So let's say the average harem beds for 6 hours during the day. You know, they bed down, they rest. Now this bull bred all night. He ran around protecting his group all night. Now all of a sudden he's been resting for 6 hours. After 6 hours, when that bull gets up, the one thing on his mind, breeding those cows. So now all of a sudden in the morning, he's not in the mood. He just wants to go to bed. Sounds similar. In the afternoon, all of a sudden, he's excited. He's rested. He is ready to breed again. So think about those two situations. If I'm a female elk, I'm a hunter using a cow call. Do I want to call to a bull that's already bred, that's tired, that's weak, that wants to bed? Or do I want to call to the bull that just took a long nap and is frisky? There you have it. Chase those animals that are more active. So in the afternoon hunts, I play my wind. Generally speaking, I'm going to have an upward wind in most situations. The bulls will be bedding in a canyon. A lot of times I'll go above those animals with wind in my face. So I'm sitting above them, wind's coming uphill. A lot of times in the afternoon, these calves will get up. They'll start walking around. They'll start mingling. The second the cows or the calves get up and start kind of running around, it starts making that bull kind of nervous. The second that first cow stands up, that bull stands up and he is bugling to pull that group back together. So I'm above these animals. The second I hear that first bugle, I know that bull's out of his bed. I charge. I mean, it is literally you're going. You are putting pressure. That bull bugles. I bugle one time to let him know I'm coming, just so I don't startle that animal, and I start coming at that animal. That bull instantly is going to start pushing his cows downhill to get away from you, but you're above him. You can go a little faster. You're not tired. You put enough pressure, and that bull is going to snap and say, okay, it's time to fight. And you're going to have that head-on-head experience of that close interaction, and you're going to be successful. Now, again, guys, come up here in a couple weeks. We're going to have a full show dedicated to nothing but calling. We're going to walk you through the calls, the ins and the outs, making different tones, all that kind of thing. It's going to be a longer show. But tonight, I just more want to talk about that interaction. More importantly, I want to really build into an idea and a concept of scouting. Everybody I talk to scouting plans so much of a morning hunt. They're out there scouting in the morning, like, man, I'm 5 miles in. If you're 5 miles in and you stay 5 miles in, what are you going to do in the afternoon? I talk to so many hunters like, well, I would have stayed in here, but I don't want to hike 5 miles out in the dark. I don't want to hike 10 miles out in the dark. I don't want to hike 400 yards out in the dark. So they really change their hunt plans because they don't plan on hunting a certain style hunt or a certain, hunt in general. So for you, the hunter, have that in mind, especially if you're going to be in that calling situation. You're going to hunt mid-September. You're planning on a rut. You have big bulls and good cows. You know there's going to be a good harem. In that situation, I always try to kill them in the morning, but generally speaking, my morning hunt is more of a scouting outing and me to put them in bed and know exactly where they're at. At that point in time, I plan my afternoon, I get my wind right, I get rested, and I really plan for that hard-hitting afternoon hunt. If I look at the big bulls I've killed across the board, most of these animals are harvested in the afternoon, strictly for the fact that these bulls make more mistakes in the afternoon. They don't think with their head in the afternoon. They make very lovesick, emotional decisions in the afternoon, and that's what puts these animals on the ground. So when you're hunting big, mature animals, smart animals, a lot of times that afternoon is going to offer you more success, especially if you're the hunter who's like, man, I've been calling a year and I've never got it done. You start switching to the afternoon hunts, and I promise you, you're going to start having more success. So again, you're still out in the morning, you're still putting the animals to bed, but you're just planning on doing a little bit more aggressive hunting in the afternoon, and a lot of times that's going to have very much success for you. So keep that in mind. Again, in a couple weeks, we're going to talk about calling, a whole show dedicated to that. The next show we're doing next Monday is all about field care. We're going to be talking to Steve Hine from Steve's Meat Market, a big world-famous meat cutter. He's going to be in here with us. We're going to talk about cuts of meat, talking about field dressing, everything there is to do about meat to make sure that you're successful with that. The week after that, we're actually going to be talking about calling. So we're going to have some professional callers in here. We're going to walk you through the calls, the ins and the outs, and things like that. But again, tonight was just a rough idea of calling, what's going on there. More importantly, so you, the hunter, can plan through scouting. Hey, I know I'm going to have to be in this valley back here for an afternoon hunt. How do I get out? What's the best way for me to exit this area without scaring more animals, without hurting myself in rough terrain, things like that? Where should I park my truck? Where's the best wind? There's a lot of things that go into it. But more importantly, the moral of the story, I want you to plan on hunting both the morning and the afternoon of these upcoming hunts, both mule deer and elk. There's a lot of things that happen in the afternoon, and a lot of times hunters miss out on that by just hunting one morning. Are you a morning hunter? You're an afternoon hunter? Comment right now. What are you? Morning? Afternoon? Comment right now, too. Let's take a little study. When's been your greatest success? Afternoon or morning? Is it because you simply just hunt mornings or afternoons? But think about that, guys. I promise you, it's going to help you out. Now, guys, we're going to wrap up here in just a second. But again, we appreciate it so much. We're going to have a couple more questions here. But again, thank you so much for joining us. If you're just joining, I am Nate Zielinski, coming to you live from the Bowtech Facebook page. We're also really excited to have Bass Pro Shops of Denver on here. Again, it's always in the Nate Zielinski Facebook page. We really encourage you to give you a like. I have got a lot of photos from this last week. We're just going to start posting here in the next couple days. So make sure you like the Nate Zielinski fan page, as well as Tightline Outdoors and the Diamond Archery page. So, Devin, we got another question for us, so we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, you kind of commented on in the afternoon the wind was going to be going uphill, and we've got a lot of what appear to be new elk hunters.
Yep.
It's common knowledge for you and I which way the thermals go
Yep.
morning and night, but why don't you just touch base on that real quick?
Absolutely. Chasing thermals is everything. And you have wind and you have thermals, and you really have to kind of watch that. In a calm situation with no wind, generally speaking, your wind is going to be sucking down the valleys in the dark portions of the day. We'll just put it that way. So the colder portions of the day or at night, generally speaking, your thermals are going to be sucking downhill. When that sun starts getting higher in the sky, those thermals are going to switch and suck uphill. Now, it's very important for us to know the difference between a thermal and a wind direction, because a lot of times you have to anticipate both. But a calm day, you're learning your thermal. So on the spots I'm hunting right now, if I'm hunting my average drainage through scouting, now some of this is going to change because it's July, but right now I have a good down current thermal. So I have a good thermal coming downhill right now until about 7:45 to 8 o'clock in the morning. I am hunting some sunny hillsides, so about 8 in the morning, my wind's starting to switch. It swirls for about 15 minutes. By 8:30, I have an upward, thermally or pulling wind. So my thermals, my scent is coming uphill. My afternoon, I'm not actually getting a downward thermal until about 6 p.m. It's been so hot. It's about 6 p.m. when my thermals switch and start sucking back downhill. Now that's important for me to know, because as a hunter, if I'm sitting above those elk in that bed, I have to look at my watch and say, okay, from scouting in the last couple weeks, I know that I have upward thermals till 5:30 p.m. Is that bull going to stand up out of that bed by the time my thermals switch? If you don't think so, then I'm going to sit quite a ways away. I'm going to wait till they get up and I'll hunt them from the bottom side. But again, have to know those thermals. Generally speaking, the colder portions of the day, so evenings, mornings, and at night, thermals are sucking down the terrain, When it's warmer in the day, those thermals are going to be sucking up the terrain. Now, you also have to keep into wind consideration, especially you start getting into higher elevation. You'll have thermals pulling one direction, you'll have a wind direction pushing another direction, which can add a whole new element to your hunt. But again, make sure through scouting, especially the week to 2 weeks before the season, you're scouting your thermals, and then you're also watching your local weather station to determine wind. So I just do a weather station, the closest actual true weather station that I have. In Colorado, we actually use the Department of Transportation. So I have an app for CDOT, at cdot.org on my phone, and I actually pull up a weather station. A lot of times these weather stations are going to be major crossings on a highway. But you can actually pull up the weather station. Is going to give you true wind direction at that station. So, I'm going to go out at 2 a.m. on a scouting trip. I'll pull up that wind direction, see the wind direction. I can anticipate the thermals, and I can have a really good idea of where my scent is going to be and where my scent is not going to be. So hopefully that answered for you.
We've got one more. I lost the question here,
yep.
But basically in Colorado, obviously, the muzzleloader falls into archery
yep.
season. Any advice for archery hunters during that muzzleloader or just after with all the pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that the muzzleloaders put a lot. It's just more people in the woods. I don't think that the muzzleloader actually puts more pressure. It's not like it's a different style of hunter. We're all calling. We're all actively chasing these elk in a spot and stock situation. But there's no doubt it adds an influx of numbers of people in the woods. Generally speaking, since the muzzleloader season is a 9-day season in Colorado, your hunters oftentimes stay for that whole season, where an archery hunter might come up into the woods for 2-3 days, back out, come in 2-3 days and back out. A lot of times those muzzleloaders stay in there for 9 days. So you definitely see an influx of camping. So with that, you have people cutting wood with chainsaws. You have people, burning fires at night. So there's no doubt it definitely does put a little bit more pressure on the given situation. Muzzleloaders are going off, gunshots are going off. At that point in time, I honestly, to be totally honest, I don't think that the noise of a gun actually affects them that much. 2 years ago, I actually had a muzzleloader tag, and we shot a bull in a herd, a very large satellite bull, a 300-inch satellite bull. Dropped that bull. When the gun went off, the actual herd bull was bugling at the gun it up, and then we pursued the animal up canyon a little bit, and within 300 yards of the other bull, we killed the herd bull. So the gunshots literally had zero effect on that animal. So I don't think that, everybody talks about the gunshots. I don't think the gunshots rattle them that much. They're rutting hard. So it's more just more people in the woods and possibly more scent as people are camping a little bit longer in the woods. So to me, to be totally honest, I think that in Colorado, that third week of archery, which is the muzzleloader season, I think it's one of the prime times for rut. Generally speaking, it's going to follow a moon phase. We oftentimes have a full moon that time of year, so the rut activity is great. Now, the full moon really just puts the animals to bed earlier, so it doesn't help your time of day hunting, but it does help the rut phase, so your animals tend to get more fired up. So it's a love-hate. You get more activity out of the animals, but less time to hunt them during that activity. But again, I don't let it affect me. I hunt my same ways. You might have to really have that plan A, B, and C, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. So, have your normal plan or your goals to hunt. Hey, I'm hunting this drainage, but if these animals get pushed out, where do they go? Have that in your head of where that plan B is going to be, and during muzzleloader, you might have to execute that plan B if these animals get pushed around a little bit. But again, by no means would I avoid that week. I think it's a great week to hunt, and we're all very similar in our styles of hunting. Perfect. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up so it doesn't get too long. Again, my name is Nate Zielinski. I'm the ambassador for Bowtech Archery. Again, huge thanks to Bowtech Archery for letting us take over their feed. We really appreciate them giving the opportunity to come live. If you like this show, guys, comment to them. Tell them that you like it. We'll continue doing it. So again, we're coming to you live from the Bowtech Archery page, the Bowtech website, the Diamond Archery page, Bass Pro Shops in Denver. Huge thanks to them. Guys, they're the largest retailer in Denver area. If you're out of state, you're coming to Colorado, stop by Bass Pro Shops. You can get your licenses there, everything you need. I'm hanging out in that store a lot, so you can ask those questions there. We also have some seminars coming up live from Bass Pro Shops in Denver, so make sure you check those out. We're also coming to you live from Tightline Outdoors and the Nate Zielinski Facebook page. Make sure you give that Nate Zielinski Facebook page a like. Now, guys, there's a lot of other live feeds that you got to check out. Coming up Wednesday, you have Chef Collins. Guys, you put it on the ground, this guy can cook it. I mean, literally, we should put him up to a roadkill challenge. The guy can cook anything, and it's absolutely amazing. Got to hang out with him at some shows. So again, make sure you check out that show, Chef Collins. Also check out Randy Newberg, guys. He is an elk wizard. So make sure you check out that and those some other shows later in the week. So again, stay tuned. Make sure you text WATCH to 313131. You'll get the live updates and the alerts of when you should be watching this page and when everything's going live. So again, guys, we'll see you next week as we talk game care. Also continue with our scouting and where you should be in your scouting process for big game anywhere you're at. Again, I'm Nate Zielinski. Make sure you comment all your questions, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great night. You should be in your scouting process for big game anywhere you're at. Again, I'm Nate Zielinski. Make sure you comment all your questions, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.